The Switch is dying. Just kidding. It's still selling great, but just because it's selling amazing doesn't mean that the clock isn't ticking. We can definitely tell Nintendo is slowing down the release schedule this year, and this is usually a pretty big indicator of a new generation of their consoles on the horizon. But what exactly will that look like? Are we looking at a Switch 2 or something new? What hardware upgrades could we see? And most interestingly, what could its first year of games look like? Firstly, let's discuss what exactly the console will be holistically. Are we looking at a sequel console or just another upgrade? Will it retain the Switch name and therefore keep its hybrid form? Or will it be something we've never seen before? Personally, the smart decision in my opinion is to keep the Switch branding and that hybrid factor. This isn't the same case as the Wii U where nobody bought it because people thought it was an add-on for the Wii. People bought the Wii for Wii Sports and just weren't interested in a sequel product. People bought the Switch because it was a home console that you could play anywhere. So now that they've cultivated a massive install base for the Switch, they need to create a product that appeals to that same audience, but also gives them something they just can't get on the old Switch model, not just exclusive games. We know all too well that a Nintendo console isn't a Nintendo console without a gimmick. Even one of Nintendo's most obvious sequel products, the 3DS, had a gimmick like this. So what exactly could it be? Anything really. VR, 4K, modular controllers, cellular support, Spy Kids 4D scratch and sniff gaming? But what I think it might actually be is wireless docking. Removing the dock enhances the portability of the Switch tenfold. You no longer need to carry around this hunk of plastic and 2 cords over to your friend's house to just play some games. All you need to do to connect your Switch to a TV now is a smart TV app or just the small AirDock connector. It's not the most exciting idea in the world for sure, but it is the kind of update that I would expect from a sequel Switch. I don't expect a game-changing gimmick here. I honestly think a hardware upgrade with quality of life changes in sick branding and design will do the trick here. So speaking of branding, what do I think the name will be? Well, here's 10 names that I could see happening, going from my least favorite to favorites. Firstly, the new Nintendo Switch. Probably the most realistic one on this list, but to me it seems a bit too much like an upgraded Switch than a true sequel Switch. Nintendo Switch Air. Could be used from my Air Dock concept, but also kind of sounds a lot like an Apple product. Nintendo Switch Max. We've got a Switch Lite. The next logical step is a massive beefy Switch with a name like Max. Nintendo Switch Plus. Switch Plus is a classy name for a sequel console. It simply explains what it is, but doesn't beholden them to name the next console after that the Switch 3. Nintendo Nimbus. A cloud pun that could be used for cloud gaming or an AirDock. I doubt they leave the Switch branding behind, but who knows? This alliteration is kinda sick. Nintendo Switch 2. It's simple, it's nice, and gives Nintendo a structured branded system name after almost 40 years of fumbling between names. Super Nintendo Switch. New Nintendo Switch, but just so much better, and it's a cute callback to their history while also moving into the future. Nintendo Switch X. What does the X stand for? Hell if I know, but it looks sick. Nintendo Cross keeps the same symbolism as the Switch, but with a fresh new synonym that, in my opinion, sounds way cooler than the Switch. Nintendo Switch 2. This might just be the dumbest, but also the greatest name of all time. The Nintendo Switch 2 being a play on the number 2, but also the word 2, which basically means as well, is an ingenious name that shows that it is in fact a sequel to the Switch, but also showing that it has so much more to offer with a name like Switch 2. It just gives me goosebumps. It's so clean, yet at the same time, so goofy that it feels perfect for Nintendo's next system. But maybe that's just me. Let me know in the comments if you're team Switch 2 based or team Switch 2 cringe, you buffoon. Nintendo would never name their next console some dumb name like that. Now that we have a name and a premise for the next console, or shall I say, the Switch 2, what changes and additions are we going to make? Firstly, let's discuss Joy-Cons. They're a crucial part of the brand with the Switch, so in my opinion, they must stay. But that doesn't mean they can't evolve. Firstly, let's change them to be more ergonomic. They may no longer be symmetrical to play in split Joy-Con mode, but if you're playing like that in the first place, you're going to be no more comfortable holding the new design than you were with the old ones. Next, let's make the buttons and sticks bigger to give an even more comfortable experience to the handheld player. And finally, let's fix Joy-Con drift once and for all. If that happens, I'm perfectly fine keeping the Joy-Cons. Then what about graphical power? I suspect something around the PS4, Xbox One level. Being a generation behind is nothing new to Nintendo, so I highly doubt they go any higher than that. I'm personally okay to tolerate it as long as Nintendo is able to make games like Tears of the Kingdom without 1, constant frame drops, and 2, at a solid 1080p. I'd honestly be fine if we can just get that. How about quality of life changes? Firstly, no more friend codes. It's the 21st century, that dino technology belongs in the past. Next, let's get some real baked-in voice chat. No more phone app bullcrap. Voice calls and party chats are a must. You don't need in-game chats with randos because I honestly don't think Nintendo games need that, but friend calls need to happen. Finally, let's spice up the Switch with some personality. Customizability was a big blank space with the original Switch, so seeing things like themes, menu music, and maybe even a new UI that makes the new system pop would be incredible. Finally, backwards compatibility is just a must with the Switch 2. After 7 years of basically porting every popular game that they've ever made to the Switch, I think it would be downright criminal not to have backwards compatibility. Switch game cards should be compatible with the Switch 2, as well as cloud transfers of games and game data. I should not have to be repurchasing games I already have on the Switch 2. Not to mention, it would just be plain stupid. The worst part about new consoles are their lack of games to play at launch. Allowing customers to go out and buy games from the original Switch to play on the Switch 2 at launch just seems like a must if Nintendo wants a big head start with their next-gen system. Speaking of head starts, how exactly can the Switch 2 have a successful start that will carry over into a successful long-term console? Firstly, let's discuss when it should launch. I'm not going to give an exact year because while it seems like it's the works and may be coming out next year, I'm not totally convinced it's coming out next year. Instead, I'm going to predict what time of year it's going to come out. Nintendo took the unconventional springtime release approach with the Switch coming out in March of 2017. I think two things led to this outcome. Firstly, Nintendo just needed to move on from the Wii U. In a perfect world, I actually think the Wii U lives into 2019 alongside the 3DS, and then they release their next home and portable consoles in the fall of 2020. But because of the treacherous times they were in with the failing Wii U, Nintendo needed to get their new unconventional console in front of as many eyes as possible. They did this in many ways, like revealing it in October, a historically slow time for game news, and showing it off on high-viewed programs like The Tonight Show and the Super Bowl. And secondly, they needed to release it alongside the highly anticipated Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. So what does any of this have to do with the Switch 2 and when it will be announced and released? Well, I think Nintendo actually had an epiphany with releasing the Switch. It was their timing. They've always been a blue ocean company. They never try to compete with the other competitors in their field. But for some reason, before the Switch, they always seem to like to release their consoles at the same time in November. Instead, they create their own paths and forge new markets and products that consumers would be happy to buy, even if they already owned a competitor's product. So it just didn't make logical sense for them to compete in the holiday release rush. What they learned they needed to do was build up a steady momentum over the course of its first year, racking up an install base and a solid game lineup. Then the holidays come, and now you've not just got a new console to push, but you've got an entire ecosystem to sell. So when it comes to the Switch 2 releasing, I think any time before summer makes sense to me. I think February to May is the range I'd expect, while March to April is their sweet spot. Finally, let's talk about the first year launch lineup. What I think made the Switch's first year so impactful were their wide array of incredible games that appealed to all audiences. You had the big single-player adventure in Breath of the Wild, the casual's paradise in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, the big online multiplayer juggernaut in Splatoon 2, and finally the big-name franchise platformer with Mario Odyssey. Long story short, these four categories of games, in my opinion, are the reason why the Switch became as big as it is. They released all four of these over the course of its first year, and by the time it became holiday shopping season, the Switch really had anything for everyone. So how can we recreate that 2017 magic? Let's give the Switch 2 one of each of those categories for its launch year. Firstly is the big single-player adventure. Unfortunately, Tears of the Kingdom just came out, so that's off the table. But what can we expect to fill that spot? While it's no Zelda, I think Metroid Prime Prime 4 perfectly fills this spot. It obviously can't be the big game the console launches with, I just don't think Metroid has that pull yet, but plop this in right near the holidays in the October-November slot, and I think it has a huge chance of being successful. Next is the Casual's Paradise. I thought about putting a new Mario Kart game here, but honestly that just felt like a cop-out. Instead, I decided to go with Super Smash Bros. Ultimate Deluxe. I think this coming out shortly after its release, right before the summer, would be nice. Obviously, it's no Mario Kart, but I think an Ultimate Deluxe with 1 or 2 new fighters and a few new stages and modes would be really cool. I obviously expect backwards compatibility, so this may be a little weird, but I think pushing Smash Ultimate even more would honestly be good for Nintendo. And if we really wanted to go with a super casual game instead, I could honestly see a new Mario Party in this spot. Superstars came out in 2021, and you just know how they turned those puppies out. So I wouldn't be shocked or disappointed with a new entry here instead. Then we've got the summer multiplayer juggernaut. This one was very tough. We just got Splatoon 3 in 2022, but that game sold incredibly well. If the Switch 2 releases in more than 1 year and not in 2024, I wouldn't be surprised if Splatoon 4 is made. I would hate for them to rush it out, but Splatoon is quickly becoming a money printer for Nintendo, and a launch year Splatoon title honestly makes too much sense for me right now. Then finally, what's the big name franchise platformer that Nintendo's gonna release alongside their new system? It's Mario. It's 3D Mario. Maybe it's Odyssey 2, maybe it's not, but if we're getting a new console, we're getting a new 3D Mario. Maybe it's like 3D World, maybe it's like Odyssey, maybe it's even Bowser's Fury 2. But what I can tell you is that the next system's big release date game is 3D Mario. Without question, it's Mario. So, there we have it. What are your thoughts? Do you think I'm close, or do you think I'm just way off base? Let me know down below, and check out this video right here discussing what I believe Nintendo's biggest missed opportunities were with the Switch. All right, it's time to go. See ya.